Hello, welcome to this video lecture for Chapter 9. Today we'll be talking about field specifications and why those field specifications are important, what we mean by field level integrity, and the anatomy of a field specification. So as you go back and review this chapter, make sure that you understand these main topics. So the first thing is why is it important to make sure that you have the field specifications set before you start putting in data? This is going to give you some high levels of consistency. I've mentioned this before, but when you enter data into a column, it all needs to be the same consistency. That is if you're going to ask for state, let's say the column name is state, and you're going to ask for state. Well, the spelling of that state has to be the same from record to record. That way, when you're searching for all the same records that match that particular state, you only have to look for one spelling of that state. So that's what we mean by consistency. The example would be, let's say we were looking for the state Texas. Well, you could have TX in there, an abbreviation. You could have capital T and then X's as the rest, or all lowercase. You want to make sure that everything is in there the same. That way, when you're doing a search, you only have to look for the spelling once. So that leads to high accuracy and high quality of that data in your database. If you don't manage that field specification and you're not consistent, then you're going to get a bunch of garbage in and a bunch of garbage out, and you won't be able to make good queries and do good decision making with that data once you've retrieved it. So getting those fields correct is a critical element in data analysis. If we have a bunch of bad data in each of our columns, it's not consistent, then we won't be able to really make any judgments about that data or decisions with that data, I should say. So fields take us to a cellular level of analytics, if you will. And so it needs to be as precise as we possibly can get it. Otherwise, again, you're just making bad decisions. And so you should get all the correct field types and field specifications when you're doing your interviews, and ask, what kind of information is this? How does it have to be captured? How does it have to be represented back out in reports and things? So it's vital to the operations and success and future growth of the organization and also of that database. If the database is presumed not to be working well and not providing good data, then people won't use it, people won't make decisions with it, and you'll have wasted your time and your money developing that database. So a lot of times when you see companies building databases, they don't spend a lot of time looking at the structural and logical integrity of the fields in their database. And so when that's the case, then they're just capturing that information and think that they can do things with it later on, and it just becomes very difficult to do. So an example would be is if you look at the database structures or the table structures that we have in our access assignments, a lot of times you see short text, which is the default data type. And so you could just make all of your data short text and then worry about, searching for dates later on, which means you have to do some conversion, and you got to make sure. And then what happens if people didn't enter all their dates in the same way? Somebody used slashes, somebody used hyphens. You got to go and clean all that up. And so a little time spent up front is going to save you a lot of time on the back end. So another way of saying this is that the investment toward building a consistent data and quality information is not wasting your time, because when you go to doing your queries, it's going to be very important and much more efficient and quicker to get that information or data back out. So here I've got on the screen a products table and showing you in the data definition language, if you will, or the data dictionary for this database, all the field names and their data types. So this one, if you think about it, instead of leaving everything as short text, it's done a fairly good job of thinking about what the data type has to be and thinking about the length, whether it's required or not, and so on. So we've got different numbers here. We've got a unit price. We want that to be currency so they can't enter something else. Same thing for this. If it's discontinued, it's a Boolean. What kind of format do we want, and so on. So they've done a really good job, in my opinion, of setting up the different data types here. Employees here, not so much in terms of keeping everything short text, but they did change the hire date to a date time, so that way you can make sure you can search on that if you need to. If you kept it short text and entered that data, it would have made it very difficult to search on a particular date or calculate how long it's been since another date. It's hard to do with using short text. So hopefully that gives you some idea what we're talking about in terms of that integrity for the field names. So field specification is very critical. And first thing is, it helps establish and enforce that field level integrity. And because you specify that field specification, that's going to help you enhance the overall data integrity inside of your database. Then also, because you're thinking about it, it's going to help you understand the nature and purpose of the data in the database. So an example might be if you're looking at two different tables and you understand that in one table you've got something called first name, and then in another table you've got employee first name. Are they the same? Are they being used the same? If that's the case, should they be in two different tables? And so helping to understand how that data is used throughout your organization in terms of the reports it's generating will help you build a better database. And so what I was talking about earlier in that previous access database, that field specifications make up the data dictionary in your database. So when we're designing that table, that's what we're doing here as part of that data dictionary. Now it says description is optional, but you would really want to try and put in there as much as you could in terms of information so that the next person that's looking at the structure of your database understands how these fields are being used and possibly where that data is coming from. So one of the things we wanted to make sure you understand out of this chapter is something called field level integrity. And that comes after you define the complete set of field specifications for that field. So those field specifications include the data type, maybe a description, and any information that you might have below. Different types of databases will have that information listed or done differently. Right, so for last name, you can see we can have a whole bunch of different specifications here. So the process isn't easy. It's, you want to think about your data. You don't want to just use the default short text or whatever the default data type is when you're building your tables. And if you come across a table that's built that way, you can almost be guaranteed that it's going to make your life more difficult if you're the one that's analyzing the data from such a table. So you may want to go back and review Chapter 7. So in Chapter 7, we talked about the elements of the ideal field, and so you want to make sure you conform to that. So when we talk about the field specification, there are three categories of field specification elements. There's the general, the physical, and the logical. So when we talk about general elements, we're looking at the field name, the parent table, a caption, and a description. Now for us in Access, caption is what is displayed when we retrieve that data, not just the field name. The physical elements are the data type, the length, any decimal places if it's numeric, any kind of input mask that we have when it's presented on the screen so that the user knows how we want that data entered. Examples that we've used might be a phone number or a date that you have on the screen, how you want that date to be listed and put into the database. The last category, the logical elements, might include things like key type, whether it's primary key or not, its uniqueness, will it have null support, that is, will you allow no information to be in that field when you're inputting a record? Is it required or not? Do you want a default value when it starts, or a range of values that the user can select from, or that the user can only input from, and if they go outside of the range, they're prompted to put in the correct data that fits in that range. All right, so those are examples of anatomy of field specifications. That ends what I wanted to discuss about Chapter 9. Make sure you read the book and ask me any questions if you have some.